My 15-year-old daughter found out she had a half-sister on a Tuesday night. There was no dramatic phone call, no stranger at the door, no confession, just a laptop, a school project, and a $39 DNA kit. The match appeared near the top of Nora's screen. Possible half-sibling. The girl's name was Lily Cross. She was 7 years old. And according to the location listed on the account, she lived less than 10 miles from our house. Nora stared at the screen for a few seconds. Then she turned toward me. Mom, does Dad have another daughter? Before I could answer, David walked into the room. He glanced at the laptop. The moment he saw Lily's name, his entire face changed. He did not ask who she was. He did not ask whether the test might be wrong. He did not even ask why Nora had taken it. He stepped toward the laptop and told her to delete the account. That was when I knew the match was not a mistake. What Nora found online was only the beginning. Because once I started looking through our financial records, I discovered that my husband had been paying for Lily's housing, medical bills, school expenses, and summer camps for 7 years. 7 years. All while telling me we could not afford to put more money into our own daughter's college fund. If you believe the truth always leaves a trail, subscribe. This story is about betrayal, hidden money, divorce, and the kind of justice that arrives quietly. My name is Marianne Holt. I was 52 when my daughter found Lily online. By then, I had spent almost 20 years working in the billing department of a local hospital. I supervised a small team that handled insurance disputes, overdue accounts, and numbers that did not make sense the first time you looked at them. I was not an accountant. I was not an investigator. But I knew records. I knew dates. And I knew that one mistake looked very different from a pattern. David and I had been married for 25 years. He was 55 and worked as a regional sales director for a company that sold industrial safety equipment. His job involved conferences, client dinners, hotel receipts, and short business trips that often appeared on our calendar with almost no warning. I never liked how often he traveled, but after enough years, you stop questioning every airport run and every late dinner. You tell yourself that work is work. You tell yourself this is what helped pay the mortgage. Our marriage was not perfect. We argued about money sometimes. We forgot appointments. We disagreed about home repairs, family plans, and who was supposed to call the plumber. There were nights when we went to bed irritated with each other and woke up too busy to finish the argument. But from the outside, we looked solid. We had a house in the suburbs with most of the mortgage paid down. We had separate retirement accounts. We had a college fund for Nora. Every summer, we took one family vacation, usually somewhere we could reach by car. On Sundays, we had dinner with my parents. Nothing about our life looked glamorous, but it looked safe. That mattered to me. I grew up watching my parents stretch every paycheck until there was almost nothing left. I saw what money problems could do to a marriage, so I believed stability was something two people built slowly, a little at a time. A mortgage payment, a retirement contribution, a college deposit. Then, once you built it, you protected it, together. At least, that was what I thought we had been doing. I handled most of Nora's life. School forms, doctor appointments, soccer practice, parent meetings, permission slips, birthday gifts, the endless small things that keep a 15-year-old moving from one week to the next. David loved her. I still believe that. But he missed more school events than he attended. He missed parent conferences. He missed games. He missed performances and then asked me to send him pictures afterward. I never called that betrayal. I called it division of labor. That was one of the stories I told myself, because it made the marriage easier to understand. David used to say, I bring the money in, you keep the family running. That is why we make such a good team. Back then, it sounded like appreciation. Later, I understood what he really meant. He wanted me close enough to pay the electric bill, schedule the dentist, and make sure nothing fell apart at home. He did not want me close enough to question his bonuses, business reimbursements, or company accounts. Once Lily's name appeared on Nora's screen, all the habits I had accepted as part of his job began to look different. They started to look less like work, more like a system. I did not begin investigating David that same night. I watched him. That turned out to be more useful. Small details began falling into place. Things I had explained away for years no longer felt random. The first was Thursday night. For almost 7 years, David had been unavailable most Thursdays. Sometimes he had a regional conference call. Sometimes it was dinner with a client. Other times, he said a shipment issue had turned into an emergency and he had to stay late. He usually came home after 10. If Nora had a game, a concert, or some school event on a Thursday, he always said the same thing. I'll try. Most of the time, he did not make it. The second detail was a woman named Claire Cross. I had seen her name appear on his phone more than once. David said she was a former client. A difficult one. The kind of person who still called him for advice long after the contract was finished. He did not hide his phone in the obvious way people do in bad television dramas. He never turned it face down in a panic. He never grabbed it out of my hand. He simply carried it everywhere. Kitchen, garage, bathroom, even when he stepped outside for 2 minutes. At the time, it had seemed like a habit. After Lily appeared, it felt like something else. The third detail was his bonus. David used to receive a strong payment at the end of every year. Not enough to change our lives, but enough to cover a vacation, add to savings, and make an extra mortgage payment. For the last 3 years, he said the market had been slow. His bonus, according to him, had dropped. His personal spending had not. There were new watches, hotel charges, club membership fees, business trips with upgraded rooms, dinners that cost more than our grocery bill. Somehow the company was struggling only when money was supposed to come home. Then there was the loan. 2 months before Nora found Lily, David asked me to sign paperwork for a $165,000 home equity loan. He called it a short-term investment opportunity. He said one of his business contacts had found a property that could be renovated and sold quickly. I asked for a business plan. I asked for the address. I asked who else was investing. That was when his tone changed. He said I did not understand corporate finance. He said I was overthinking it. Then he told me stress was making me suspicious and that I needed to stop treating every decision like a threat. It was a clever way to end the conversation. He did not answer my questions. He made me feel guilty for asking them. After the DNA result, that same pattern became impossible to miss. David said I was turning a technology error into a family crisis. He said these companies made mistakes all the time. He suggested my age and workload were making me anxious. But while he dismissed the match, he kept questioning Nora. Had she contacted Lily? Had she saved a screenshot? Had anyone at school seen the result? Had she shared the account with a friend? He never asked how she felt. He never asked whether she was confused. He only wanted to know how far the information had traveled. That told me more than anything else. Gaslighting is not just denying the truth. It is taking attention away from suspicious behavior and placing it on the emotions of the person asking questions. David wanted me to stop looking at his reaction. He wanted me to start questioning mine. I still did not know for certain whether Lily was his daughter. But I knew he was afraid I would find out. And fear, in that moment, told me more than denial ever could. I did not open David's phone. I did not guess passwords. I did not install tracking software. I did not search private accounts I had no legal right to enter. I looked at records that belonged to both of us. The joint bank account came first. Then our tax returns, insurance statements, mortgage files, financial mail sent to the house, and public business registrations. Inside the joint account, I found 17 transfers to a company called Cross Family Services. The amounts ranged from $650 to $1,800. The descriptions looked ordinary enough. Consulting fee, education reimbursement, client housing, medical support. David had told me before that he sometimes covered business expenses personally and received reimbursement later. So I checked. There were no reimbursements. Not one. I went back 7 years. The payments had been scattered at first. Then they became more frequent. Some appeared days before the beginning of a school term. Others showed up near summer break. A few matched the timing of medical expenses. The pattern did not follow the needs of a business client. It followed the life of a growing child. That difference mattered. I searched the public business registry. Cross Family Services belonged to Claire Cross. The registered address was a condo 9 miles from our home. It was also in the same area listed on Lily's DNA profile. At that point, coincidence was becoming a difficult thing to believe in. Then I found an older life insurance statement inside our family files. David had added a secondary beneficiary identified only by initials, L.C. The date of birth matched Lily's. I sat at our dining room table with those documents spread out in front of me. For several minutes, I did nothing. Then I picked up my phone. I almost called him. I wanted to hear him explain Claire, the condo, the payments, the child whose birthday was buried inside our insurance records. Then I remembered the home equity loan, $165,000. If David knew I had found the transfers, he could move money. He could destroy records. He could create new debt. He could start building a story that made me look unstable. He could also begin influencing Nora before she understood what was happening. That was the moment I stopped thinking like a wife, waiting for an explanation. I started thinking like a mother, protecting her child. And like a woman, protecting what was left of her future. I photographed every document. I stored copies in 2 separate places. One set stayed at my office, where David had no access. Then I scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney. At home, I changed nothing. I cooked dinner. I asked about his day. I sat across from him while he complained about work and acted as though I still believed the life he had been presenting to me. That evening, he asked whether I still thought the DNA result was accurate. I looked him in the eye and said, "Probably not." It was the first lie I had ever told my husband, and it bought me the time I needed. I carried everything into the attorney's office in a plain gray folder. Nora's DNA result was on top. Underneath it were the 17 transfers, Claire's business registration, the insurance rider, the home equity loan documents, and 7 years of household financial statements. The attorney did not gasp. She did not call David a monster. She read every page, every date, every amount. She asked where each document came from and made sure I had the legal right to possess it. Then she said something I have never forgotten. According to her, in our state, hidden income and marital funds used to support a secret relationship could matter when property was divided, but only if the evidence had been collected properly, and only if it could be presented clearly. She told me not to confront David yet. A man who had hidden another child for 7 years was not going to become honest because I raised my voice in the kitchen. So I followed her instructions. I copied the joint records. I checked my credit report. I froze new credit inquiries in my name. I confirmed that no loan had been opened using my social security number. I documented the balances in our checking account, savings account, retirement accounts, and Nora's college fund. My attorney also prepared a request for temporary financial restraints in case David tried to move money once the divorce was filed. The college fund mattered most to me. David had already suggested that we reduce our monthly contribution because business was supposedly slow. Now I knew business was not slow. The money was simply leaving through a door I had never been allowed to see. My attorney hired a forensic accountant named Paul Mercer. Paul was quiet, careful, almost painfully methodical. He did not care whether David looked guilty. He cared whether the numbers repeated themselves. They did. The 17 transfers from our joint account were only the visible part. Over 7 years. Paul found 79 payments connected to Claire or Lily. The total was $96,420. Some payments covered condo rent and management fees. Others matched preschool tuition, summer camp, dental bills, and health insurance premiums. There were regular deposits into an education account opened for Lily. One larger payment matched the down payment on a car Claire drove. Several monthly transfers were labeled as consulting fees. But Claire's company had no employees, no public clients, and no clear record of providing services to David's employer. David had not taken all the money directly from our household accounts. Part of his yearly bonus had been routed into an LLC called DHM Regional Consulting. The company was registered to a mailbox in another county. I had never heard its name once in 25 years of marriage. The money moved from David's employer into the LLC. Then it moved from the LLC to Claire. That was how he made the numbers disappear. His bonuses had not become smaller. He had simply made sure I saw less. My attorney warned me that the money was only one part of what I needed to prepare for. The other part was Nora. She said David might suddenly ask for equal custody. Not because he had spent years acting like an equal parent, but because a 50-50 schedule could make him look more involved and lower the child support he might have to pay. That possibility made me angry in a way the affair had not. David had missed parent conferences, school performances, soccer games, doctor appointments, and ordinary weekends. Yet now he might try to turn time with our daughter into a number on a worksheet. My attorney told me not to argue about it. She told me to document it. So I started keeping a calendar. I wrote down who drove Nora to school, who picked her up, who attended meetings with teachers, who scheduled medical appointments, who sat in waiting rooms, who handled practices, counseling, forms, and late-night calls from the school. I saved emails. I saved messages. I recorded the weekends David canceled and the events he missed because of work. I did not write that he was selfish. I did not write that he was a liar. I wrote the date, the time, and what happened. Facts did not need help from me. The record showed what our marriage had hidden for years. I had been Nora's primary caregiver almost the entire time. The DNA issue had to be handled just as carefully. My attorney made one thing very clear. I could not contact Lily and demand answers. I could not try to collect a sample from her. I could not involve a 7-year-old child in an adult fight. If paternity became part of the divorce or a separate child support case, an official test would have to be ordered through the proper legal process. That mattered to me. Lily was not evidence first. She was a child first. So was Nora. I arranged for Nora to meet with a counselor. At that point, she knew there had been a match. She knew her father had reacted badly. She knew I was worried. But she did not know the rest. I did not want her learning the truth from another notification on a website. I did not want her hearing it in the middle of an argument. And I did not want my anger becoming something she had to carry for me. For several weeks, I continued living beside David. That was harder than I expected. There is something deeply strange about making coffee for a man after you have seen proof that he has been financing another household. He would sit at the kitchen counter, scroll through his phone, and complain about clients. I would listen. He would ask what we were having for dinner. I would answer. He would kiss Nora on the forehead before leaving for another Thursday appointment. I would watch him go. Every normal moment felt rehearsed. Then Paul found another payment. At first, it looked like a small business expense, a real estate appraisal fee. The charge had been paid through DHM Regional Consulting. The address on the invoice belonged to Claire's condo. That alone was troubling. The date was worse. The appraisal had been ordered 11 days before David asked me to sign the home equity loan. He had not simply been paying Claire's rent. He had paid someone to calculate the value of her property before trying to borrow $165,000 against ours. I remember sitting in Paul's office while he placed both documents in front of me. The appraisal, the loan application. 11 days apart. That was when the plan became clear. The loan had never been meant for an investment opportunity. David wanted to use the equity in our home to finish paying for the life he had already built with Claire. The home I had helped pay for. The home where Nora had grown up. The home David had told me was our retirement security. He had planned to put all of it at risk so another woman could keep her condo. I thought that was the worst document we would find. It was not. During the discovery process, my attorney obtained files David had submitted to the lender reviewing the home equity application. Buried inside those documents was a spreadsheet. The title was plain: Post-Separation Household Budget. I had to read it twice before the words made sense. The budget did not list only David. It listed 3 people: David Holt, Claire Cross, Lily Cross. The $165,000 loan had already been divided on paper. Part of the money would pay the remaining balance on Claire's condo. Part would clear the debt on her car. Another portion was marked for Lily's private school fund. There was money reserved for David's divorce attorney. There was also enough for 6 months of living expenses after he left our house. He had not been considering divorce. He had been budgeting for it. On another page, David had calculated what our home might sell for. He had estimated how much of my retirement account he could claim. He had even listed 2 possible child support amounts. One amount assumed I would have primary custody of Nora. The other assumed equal custody. The second number was lower. Beside it, David had typed 4 words: reduces monthly support exposure. I stared at that sentence longer than anything else in the file. The condo hurt. The affair hurt. The hidden child hurt. But those 4 words reached somewhere deeper. David had turned time with Nora into a financial strategy. This was the man who had missed her games for years. The man who had forgotten parent meetings. The man who had asked me to send pictures from school performances because he was too busy to attend. Now he was preparing to demand half her time because it would lower a monthly payment. The spreadsheet went even further. It suggested pausing contributions to Nora's college fund and redirecting that money toward Lily's school expenses. Lily had done nothing wrong. I knew that. But David had made a choice. He had decided that one daughter could quietly lose something so he could keep the promises he had made to the other. That was not responsibility. That was theft dressed up as fatherhood. While my attorney prepared the divorce filing, I kept pretending nothing had changed. I cooked dinner. I reminded David about Nora's dental appointment. I sat beside him at a school performance and watched him applaud when it ended. I listened while he complained about weak sales, difficult clients, and rising costs. He believed I had accepted his explanation about the DNA match. One evening, he thanked me for getting back to normal. I nearly laughed. Normal was the mask he had worn for 7 years. I was only borrowing it for a few weeks. The papers were served at David's office on a Wednesday afternoon. My attorney chose the timing carefully. By then, the important records had been copied. The financial requests were ready. The college fund was protected. The motion for temporary restraints was prepared. David came home early that day. He walked into the kitchen carrying the envelope. He did not take off his coat. He did not sit down. He placed the papers on the table and looked at me for a long time. Then he asked, "How much do you know?" That was his first question. Not, "Why are you doing this?" Not, "Can we talk?" Not even, "What happened to us?" He wanted to know how much of the secret had survived. I opened the gray folder. I placed Nora's DNA result on the table. Then the list of 79 payments. Then Lily's insurance record. Then the appraisal for Claire's condo. Finally, I placed the post-separation household budget in front of him. David looked at each page without touching any of them. His face changed slowly. First confusion, then calculation, then fear. He said he had only been trying to do the right thing for an innocent child. I let him finish. Then I said, supporting a child was not the betrayal. Lying to your family and taking money from another child was... David said the situation was complicated. He said Claire had pressured him. He said he had been trapped. He said I did not understand how frightened he had been when he first learned about Lily. Then he said he could explain every payment if I would give him one evening. One evening. As though 7 years of lies could be cleared up between dinner and bedtime. I closed the folder. You can explain it in discovery. That was all I said. I told him the guest room was ready. From that moment forward, any discussion about money, property, the house, or custody would go through our attorneys. There was no shouting. I did not throw anything. I did not call Claire. I did not demand that David choose between us. He had already made that choice years earlier. What frightened him now was that I had finally stopped asking him to admit it. He stayed in the guest room for 9 days. During that time, he tried several different versions of the same story. At first, he said Claire had threatened to expose him. Then he said he had only kept the secret to protect Nora. Then he said Lily needed him. Then he said our marriage had been unhappy for years. That last version was new. Apparently. Once the records were discovered, our 25-year marriage had suddenly become a long tragedy in which David had been the lonely one. I did not argue. There was no point. People like David do not confess when the truth catches them. They revise. He began speaking in careful sentences, the kind people use when they know lawyers may eventually hear them. He said the LLC was legitimate. He said Claire had performed consulting work. He said the condo had nothing to do with him. He said the budget was only a private exercise and not a final plan. But the old David still showed through. One night, he stood in the kitchen and told me I was destroying the family over paperwork. I looked at him and said, "No, David. The paperwork is just how I found out you already did." After that, he stopped trying to speak to me without his attorney involved. His formal response to the divorce arrived 2 weeks later. It was denial wrapped in legal language. He claimed DHM Regional Consulting was a legitimate side business. He described Claire as a former client. He said the payments were voluntary assistance and not hidden support. He insisted he had no ownership interest in the condo. He called the post-separation household budget a hypothetical planning document. The papers made him sound calm. Reasonable. Almost generous. That was the version of David he had always shown the world. Then Paul started matching the documents. David's bonuses went into the LLC. Money from the LLC went to Claire. Tuition bills matched transfers made days before their due dates. The condo appraisal matched Claire's registered business address. The insurance records named Lily. The education account received steady deposits from the same hidden income stream. The lender's file showed exactly where the home equity money was supposed to go. David had asked me to risk our house while already assigning the money to Claire's condo, Claire's car, Lily's schooling, and his own divorce expenses. He had not made one bad decision. He had built a system. The court was not being asked to punish him for having an affair. My attorney explained that clearly. The real questions were whether David had disclosed his income honestly, and whether he had used marital funds without my knowledge for the benefit of another household. That distinction mattered. Morality could be argued. Bank records could not. While our divorce moved forward, Claire realized the private arrangement was ending. The payments had slowed. The loan had failed. David no longer controlled the money the way he once had. So Claire filed her own case. She asked the court to establish paternity and order formal child support for Lily. For 7 years, David had wanted everything unofficial. Unofficial payments, unofficial promises, and unofficial second family. Claire had accepted that while the money kept arriving, once it stopped, she wanted the law involved too. The DNA test was conducted through the proper legal process. The result confirmed that David was Lily's biological father, with a probability above 99.9%. Nora's online match had not been a glitch. It had been the first honest record in the entire story. After that, David could no longer call Claire an ordinary client. He could no longer describe Lily as a child he had simply chosen to help. The truth now had his name on it. And unlike the stories he had told me, it came with numbers the court could verify. Once paternity was confirmed, the financial case became much harder for David to explain away. The court was not interested in punishing him simply because he had been unfaithful. That was never the strongest part of our case. The court cared about income. It cared about disclosure. It cared about whether money earned during our marriage had been moved, hidden, and spent without my knowledge. Paul showed how David's bonuses had been routed through DHM Regional Consulting. He showed how the money left that company and reached Claire. He matched transfers to school bills, insurance premiums, condo expenses, and deposits into Lily's education account. The numbers were not estimates. They came from records David had created himself. That was the thing about his system. It had worked because he assumed no one would ever put all the pieces on the same table. Once they were there, the story was not complicated at all. The court considered the money diverted from our marriage when dividing the property. David's real income, including the money that had passed through the LLC, was used when his support obligations were calculated. He was also ordered to contribute toward the forensic accounting costs and part of the legal fees caused by his incomplete financial disclosures. The home equity loan never closed. That mattered more to me than almost anything else. Our house was not used to pay off Claire's condo. Nora's college fund remained protected. The money David had planned to redirect toward Lily's private school stayed where it belonged. None of that made me happy about Lily's situation. She was innocent, but protecting one child did not require stealing from another. David had spent years pretending those were the only two choices. They were not. Then came custody. David asked for equal time with Nora. His attorney described him as a loving father who wanted to preserve a close relationship with his daughter after the divorce. On paper, it sounded reasonable. That was why my calendar mattered. My attorney presented years of school meetings, medical appointments, soccer practices, counseling sessions, transportation schedules, and daily routines. Most of them had been handled by me. The record also showed the weekends David had canceled, the performances he had missed, the appointments he had forgotten, the times he had chosen another Thursday obligation over something Nora had asked him to attend. Then my attorney placed David's own spreadsheet beside that record. His sudden request for equal custody appeared in the same document where he had calculated how much it would reduce his monthly child support. That did not mean he did not love Nora. People can love someone and still use them. That was one of the hardest truths I learned during the divorce. I did not ask the court to remove David from Nora's life. I did not want revenge through my daughter. I asked for a schedule that reflected the life she had already been living and gave her the stability she needed. I was granted primary residential custody. David received defined parenting time and a support obligation based on his corrected income. Through Claire's separate case, he also became legally responsible for supporting Lily. For years, David had controlled both households by keeping everything unofficial. He chose when to pay. He chose how much to send. He chose which promises mattered that month. He could tell Claire the money was delayed because of me. He could tell me his bonus was smaller because of the market. Neither woman had the full picture. That was how he stayed in control. Once the truth entered the court record, that control disappeared. Now the amounts had due dates. The obligations had case numbers. The income had to be disclosed. He could no longer move money from one family to another and call it a business expense. He had child support for Nora. He had child support for Lily. He had legal fees, forensic accounting costs, LLC debt, and the expense of finding a separate place to live. He also had to account for the marital money he had already spent without my knowledge. David had built his secret life around the belief that our house would eventually finance it. When the loan failed, the entire plan began to collapse. Claire had been told the condo would soon be paid off. She had been told David would leave our marriage with enough money to give them a comfortable beginning. She had been told his divorce would be clean. I know that because some of those promises appeared in the messages and financial documents produced during the case. But promises feel different once they arrive with legal fees and support orders attached. Claire's condo was never paid off. Her car debt remained. The private school fund David had planned for Lily never appeared. His relationship with Claire did not survive long after his money stopped arriving on his schedule. I did not celebrate that. Claire had known about me. She had accepted money that belonged to my marriage. But I was not interested in building the rest of my life around whether she suffered enough. The consequence was already clear. David could no longer use one woman's financial security to purchase loyalty from another. That was the karma. Not that he became homeless. Not that he lost every dollar. Not that Claire's life was destroyed. Real consequences are usually quieter than that. David simply had to live inside the truth of his own choices. He wanted 2 families. The court gave him financial responsibility for both. He wanted equal custody because it looked cheaper on a spreadsheet. The court examined the years when actual parenting had been inconvenient. He wanted our house to pay for Claire's condo. Instead, the house became part of the settlement he could no longer control. A court cannot punish every moral betrayal. It cannot restore trust. It cannot return the nights someone spent waiting for a spouse who was never where he claimed to be. But hidden income leaves records. False disclosures leave records. Money moved through shell companies leaves records. And eventually, records begin speaking for the people who have spent years being told they were imagining things. Child support was not my revenge. It belonged to the children. Custody was not a discount David could apply to his monthly expenses. It was responsibility. It was school mornings, medical appointments, late-night fevers, canceled plans, and showing up when no one was keeping score. David had spent 7 years hiding behind explanations. In the end, the numbers explained him better than he ever could. The divorce was finalized 8 months after he was served. 1 year later, Nora and I moved into a smaller townhouse near her school and the hospital where I worked. It did not have the large backyard our old house had. The kitchen was smaller. The stairs creaked. For the first few weeks, I kept opening the wrong cabinet because I had not learned where anything belonged. But every bill was in my name. Every payment came from an account I could see. There were no hidden companies, no loan papers waiting for my signature, no Thursday nights that required another story. At first, the quiet felt unfamiliar. After 25 years, peace can feel almost suspicious. You wait for the garage door. You expect a phone to light up. You think someone is about to walk in and tell you that what you saw was not what you saw. Then one day, you realize no explanation is coming. And you do not need one anymore. David's life became almost the opposite of what he had planned in that spreadsheet. He paid support for Nora. He paid support for Lily. He paid legal expenses, accounting costs, and the debt left inside his company. Claire's condo remained in her name and under her responsibility. The future David had promised her depended on money he had expected to take from our home. When that money disappeared, so did much of their relationship. A few months after they separated, David called me. By then, most of our conversations were about Nora and happened through messages. But that evening, he said he needed to speak to me directly. His voice sounded tired. He said he had made terrible mistakes. He said losing the family had changed him. He said he finally understood what I had done for him all those years. Then he asked whether there was any chance we could start over. I listened until he finished. There was a time when hearing those words would have broken me. There was a time when I would have confused regret with change. But by then, I understood the difference between missing a person and missing the life that person maintained for you. You do not miss me, David, I told him. You missed the woman who kept your life stable while you built another one behind her back. He was quiet. Then he said that was not fair. I almost smiled. Fairness had suddenly become important to him. My answer was no. I did not shout it. I did not list every lie again. I did not remind him of the condo, the college fund, or the custody spreadsheet. I said it once, calmly. No. Then I ended the call. Nora continued counseling. We told her the truth, slowly, in pieces. She was old enough to understand. I never asked her to hate her father. I never made her responsible for my pain. And I never described Lily as the reason our family ended. Lily had not created the lie. She had been born into it. Both girls deserved better than what David had given them. Over time, and with guidance from the adults and counselors involved, Nora and Lily began exchanging letters. It was awkward at first. How could it not be? They were related by blood, but almost everything surrounding that relationship had been hidden. They did not suddenly become inseparable sisters. That would not have been believable. Instead, they started with small things. Favorite books, school subjects, music, complaints about homework. The ordinary details children should have been allowed to share without carrying the guilt of adults. 2 years after the divorce, I met Robert at a hospital fundraiser. He was a widower. He had a teenage son. And he was the kind of man who did what he said he would do. At first, that quality felt almost too simple to matter. Then I realized how rare it had become in my life. Robert did not rush me. He did not make large promises. He did not tell me I needed to trust him before he had earned it. He showed up. For dinner. For a school event Nora had mentioned only once. For ordinary Sundays when there was nothing exciting to gain. He understood that I had spent years living beside someone who made secrecy look normal. So he gave me time. He earned Nora's trust the same way. Slowly. Without trying to replace her father. Without demanding a place in her life before she was ready to give him one. Eventually, our townhouse became a home for more than just Nora and me. Robert's son stayed with us on weekends. Nora complained when he ate the cereal she had saved. They argued over which movie to watch and who had left dishes in the sink. We celebrated birthdays together. We learned each other's habits. We became a family, in the least dramatic way possible. No grand speeches. No perfect beginning. Just honesty. Repeated often enough that it started to feel safe. It was not a flawless life. I no longer believed in those. It was something better. It was real. I was promoted at the hospital. I rebuilt my savings one paycheck at a time. Nora's college fund stayed intact. There were no secret accounts behind it. No one else's tuition hidden inside our bills. One evening, Nora and I were sitting in the kitchen when she asked me whether I wished she had never taken that DNA test. She was older by then. Old enough to understand how one small decision had changed almost everything. I thought about the laptop, David's face, the bank statements, the gray folder, the courtroom, the first night in the townhouse when neither of us slept very well. Then I looked at her. No, I said. The test did not destroy our family. It exposed the person who already had. Evidence did not heal me overnight. A lawyer could not return 25 years of trust. A court order could not erase the humiliation of learning that my husband had built another household with money I thought was protecting ours. But the truth gave me time. Time to protect Nora. Time to protect the college fund. Time to stop the loan. Time to keep David from spending the rest of our future before I even knew it was gone. David spent 7 years paying for a secret life. In the end, he lost the house he intended to borrow against, the financial control he depended on, the woman he had lied for, and the wife he believed would never leave. I lost a dishonest marriage. For a long time, that felt like losing everything. It was not. I gained peace. I gained a future I could see clearly, and eventually, I gained a family that did not need secrets to stay together. If you believe betrayal leaves a trail, and patience can turn that trail into justice, subscribe for more stories about cheating, divorce, custody battles, financial consequences, and the quiet moment when someone finally takes their power